Ladies and gentlemen, for this presentation, I will try as well to keep under the 30 minutes mark. So I will not go very deep, or I won't go deep at all in terms of nutritional levels and all the technicalities. We're going to discuss some concepts. All right, so let's start with the basic. We know that body weight for a laying hen, it's not only for the sake of body weight. Every single week is important. And why? Because every single week or every single group of weeks, we are developing a different system, all right? And we start with the first period, that's from first week to 5, 6 weeks, that this is the most important period ever. Why? How this graph works. So if you see the curve going up like this, we are improving, we are increasing the development, and when it's going down, it's not developing so much anymore. So what we are seeing here is that from first week to 5, 6 weeks, we have a steep increase in the immunological system development and the digestible system. Consequence of that, if you don't achieve the body weights at these first 5 to 6 weeks, you're going to have a shorter intestinal tract, and it's proved. Go to the brooder, pick up 5 weeks old, the biggest one that you can find and the smallest you can find, and if you do the necropsy, you're going to find 7 to 10% difference in intestinal length. Okay, this is huge, because of course, if you have shorter intestine, you don't have enough area to absorb all the nutrients, and you're going to be short for all the rest of the life of this chick, pullet, and adult laying hen. As well, if you don't have this development, you're going to be short in development of the immunological system. So the consequence of that, you're going to be much more susceptible to the diseases. So a lot of what is disease resistance is consequence of what happens on the first 5 weeks. Then comes the critical period, 6 to 12 weeks. And this is where the skeleton is development and the muscles are developing. And we can see right here, what we see here is body weight gain. So every single bar is this. We are seeing the body weight gain. We can see that, for example, on the 6 weeks, the body weight gain, it's almost 100 grams in a week. So when you see the metabolic effort to get body weight, the main metabolic effort is between 6 and 12 weeks. And that's exactly where the skeleton is development. And this, of course, has a direct impact in the eggshell quality. That's why it's not easy at all to keep good eggshell quality. First of all, because this is the most critical point to get body weight. Second, we have a lot of vaccinations, we have a lot of managements, we have transferring sometimes. And third, we have a lot of influence from the energy in the diet starting to pick up. Before 6 weeks, doesn't matter so much. High energy, low energy, they eat more like a broiler. After this, they are already starting to react, so the energy plays a role in this feed consumption. So it's very important. But the most important point is eggshell quality is just 20% genetics and 80 to 85% nutrition, management, health, environment. So there's nothing much that PETEC can do, or let's say, we will never see a laying hen that has an optimal eggshell quality regardless of what you do in terms of nutrition and management. Always going to be dependent on nutrition and management, okay? And then comes an important point. After 12 weeks, the dynamic changes, because you can see after 12 weeks, the majority of the system's development is coming down. It's coming down, but there's one thing that's developing really important. According to the body weight, we have the medullary bone that's more according to age and hormones, but fat. After 12 weeks, you are putting a lot of fat on these hens. It's important to have fat, of course. 30 to 35% of the yolk production depends on the fat, but if you have too much fat at this point, you're gonna have a very excessive fat pad, fat liver, mortality, prolapse, and a lot of bad consequences, okay? So we don't want to have excessive body weight at this point. It's very important then to achieve these body weights on the first 5 weeks. We saw about the importance on the intestinal tract development. We saw the importance on the immunological system development. So of course, if I have a good body weight, I'm gonna have more production. What we are seeing here, body weight at 5 weeks means at least 63% correlation with early production from 21 to 24 weeks. Almost 82% relation with production, with late production, so it gives persistence. It has more than 65% from mortality correlation, and of course, if you have more eggs, and if you have less mortality, if you have more production and less mortality, you have more hen-housed eggs. So this body weight is very correlated to amount of hen-housed eggs. Okay, so that's why I like to say this is an investment. Don't take the 5 weeks as a thing alone. Okay, I will not invest so much in nutrition because, okay, I can get this body weight later. No, this is an investment, and that's why I really encourage every one of you to use crumble diets. Srinivasa has very high quality crumble diets available. Use crumble diets because we have a lot of benefits here in terms of selection, in terms of ingredients, in terms of digestibility, additives, you name it. Okay, there's a lot of stuff here. So, really important. Now, completely important, very critical to make these hens learn how to eat. It's very expensive to concentrate a diet to a very low feed intake. If you don't have enough development of the gizzard, of the proventriculus, you don't have good feed intake capacity, there's a huge jump in energy requirements and amino acid requirements from onset of production to peak, and if they don't have enough feed intake capacity, they will not achieve the standards. You guys remember last presentation? Let's see who was paying attention. What is the body weight gain that I needed to have from first egg to peak of production? Who tell me? Come on, loud. 16 to 18%. If you can have 20%, even better. If you don't have good feed intake capacity, it won't happen. Okay? So there are several ways to teach the laying hens to have a good feed intake capacity. First of all, particle size of the diet. We encourage that after 6 weeks, the pullet should be eating already the same particle size as an adult laying hen, 900 to 1200 microns. Coarse presentation, because what we want is that, development of the gizzard. If you have a very fine diet, that's going to be what happens to your gizzard. And again, you don't have enough capacity of feed flowing through that gizzard. You don't have feed intake capacity. Your lighting program is going to be important. If you decrease faster or slower, if you have more hours or less hours, all of this is going to impact your feed intake. If you are in a challenging area and you are struggling with the feed intake, you should even consider to have artificial lights during the growing phase, and maybe instead of keep 11 hours, 12 hours, you should keep a 13 hours constant light to give more time for these pullets to eat. So lighting program is important. Midnight feeding. Midnight feeding can easily get you 3 to 5 grams more of feed intake. What's midnight feeding? You keep 3 hours of dark period, and then you put 1 to 2 hours of lights on, and then 3 hours of dark period again. If you have 3 hours before and after this feeding moment, it won't generate hormonal stimulation, and it won't affect, it won't be interpreted as light stimulation itself. It's just a booster of feeding, okay? 2 hours for me in this area, in this condition, especially after April, May, until August, September, that we know how the temperature gets. Every single flock, as soon as you get the space, you should give at least 2 hours of midnight feeding for these birds, okay? Wet mesh is a good possibility as well. We know whoever did this already see the behavior. If you put a little bit of wet mesh, they eat like crazy, but be careful. If you go too extreme, you can start to generate a lot of fungus and a lot of mycotoxin problems. So be careful, but it's very good, okay? So teach the birds how to eat because it saves money. Next one, body weight profiles. This, guys, this is critical. If you get out of this presentation with just one message, this is the message, okay? So we all remember what happens up to 60 weeks. There's 2 systems being developed. Who tell me, what are the 2 systems being developed up to 60 weeks? Digestible and immune, thank you. After 6 weeks, from 6 to 12 weeks, the 2 main systems being developed. Come on. Skeleton and muscles, all right. Very good. After 12 weeks, what is being developed mainly? Fat. So what happened to this flock? Here we are seeing standard. Here we are seeing actual. Here we are seeing the percentual difference from actual to standard. From 2 weeks up to 12 weeks, negative body weight gain. After 12 weeks, positive body weight gain. What is the profile of this pullet? Short and fat. You're going to have a shorter frame, less eggshell quality, less possibility of have persistence because it doesn't have enough muscles, less capacity to fight diseases, lower capacity of digesting nutrients, but will be more prone to mortality by prolapse and, as a consequence, cannibalism, because it simply don't have the pelvic capacity to produce an egg, and have a lot of fat, so it doesn't have flexibility to produce an egg. The consequence of that, this laying hen here, around 23 to 25 weeks, you're going to start to have prolapse. After this, it's going to keep up to 45 to 50 weeks. Then all the laying hens that had to die, they will die. Then the prolapse decrease. But to this, you can lose about 5 to 10% of your flock. So pay attention to this. So my message is, if you failed to achieve the body weights from 6 and 12 weeks, do not compensate this after 12 weeks, because this will be just increasing your mortality because it's just fat, it's not system. So use lower density diets to keep the body weight, but stimulate them to learn how to eat, because when the onset of production comes, they need to learn and they have to have the capacity of eating feed. If there's one thing that you can do, or if there's 3 things that you can do in this phase, these 3 things is grading, grading, and grading. Make uniformity. If you have uniformity, the mortality, the situation, remember, lack of uniformity generates more lack of uniformity because you have dominance. The dominant hens eat whatever they want, the dominated stay behind. If you put a group that's all together, they don't gonna have so much dominance, they're gonna keep more uniform. So grade and have uniformity. And improve your feed intake. It's be a much better situation than you have underdeveloped in fat. It's worse, underdeveloped, but uniform and lean. It's way better than the first situation, and you're going to have a better flock, okay? So again, key message, if you don't achieve the body weight up to 12 weeks, you don't seek for higher body weight after that. Keep on the same percentile. If you are 3% below target, don't try to go 10% above. Keep the 3% below, but make uniformity, right? Next one, pre-lay. Pre-lay is critical, unless eggshell quality is not critical for you. And I believe eggshell quality is critical for everyone sitting here. So if you spend 12 weeks developing a good skeleton size, now you have 2 weeks to fulfill this skeleton, or especially the medullary bones with calcium. And what's going to help you do that is pre-lay. If you don't have pre-lay, okay, you're going to have some calcium inside the medullary bone, but not enough to keep for a longer cycle. So if you want to have good eggshell quality in a longer cycle, pre-lay is a must. You should have at least 2.5% of calcium. For white varieties, they should be around 900 grams of 1 kilo to pre-lay per hen. Uniformity is going to be key for this, because if you have more developed and underdeveloped hens, the pre-lay going to work for part of the flock, but for the other half of the flock is not going to be in time. So to have a good and successful pre-lay phase, you need uniformity, okay? And the key point, coarse limestone. If you expose the laying hens to coarse limestone before the onset of production, they will be much more effective in control the limestone intake according to the calcium requirements. So then you can top dress, you can do whatever you want, and they will self-regulate, okay? And the final point, it's possible to synchronize the pre-lay with the light stimulation. If you have a uniform flock, if you are stimulating on time, from point of stimulation to onset, you have about 10 days, 12 days, and that's the amount of time you need for pre-lay. So a lot of farmers, they synchronize pre-lay with lighting stimulation. It's a better way to predict when you are achieving the body weight. You control your developer phase, feed inventory, and then you do the light stimulation and you have the pre-lay in place. With no more than 2% of production, they should already be off of pre-lay and eating your layer 1 or pre-picking diet, okay? Remember, if you don't do this, you have just 2.5% of the daily calcium intake goes to the medullary bone. So there is no way to improve calcium inside the medullary bone in a laying hen that's producing a lot of eggs. The only way to do this is stopping the egg production, molt, okay? And if you don't do that, this is what's going to happen. These animals, they are so prepared to produce an egg that they're going to start to decrease the amount of calcium from the cortical bone to keep the amount of calcium in the medullary bone. And what's the consequence of that? Cage fatigue. That's why if you do a poor job, you're going to see that as soon as you start to see problems of eggshell quality, you're going to have one on the other hand with cage fatigue, with soft bones, because they deplete all the calcium from the structural bone to produce a shell. And then it's too late, okay? Next phase, pre-picking diet. Is it fundamentally necessary to use a pre-picking diet? Are we going to die? Are we going to explode if you're not using pre-lay? No, we are not. But if you use, you're going to achieve 52 grams of egg weight much faster. And I believe that we want to achieve 52 grams faster. And that's one of the greatest benefits. Why? If you see, from 19 to 25 weeks, that's the age that the hens are more responsive to sulfurated amino acids intake. If you give the same increase of sulfurated amino acids from 25 to 29 to 33 weeks to 25, that's the age you're going to see the major improvement in egg weight. So if you do this, you're going to have a better condition to achieve a commercial egg weight faster, right? What is the pre-picking? It's a nutritional strategy to increase the feed intake from the onset until the peak. So we use a little bit of lower energy We use a higher amino acid because we want to boost not only to nutrient concentration in terms of amino acid, because of course amino acid will not limit feed intake, but we also want to increase this to a higher feed intake. It's very short period, usually from the end of prelay until 90 to 95 grams or 80% of production, right? It's really interesting that you don't let these birds achieve the peak of production with a very low energy. Don't forget the vitamins and trace minerals. During this moment, the feed intake is lower. So for me, in the farms that I'm doing the formulation, until I achieve 95 grams of feed intake for the W-80, I have 20 to 30% more vitamins and trace minerals in the diet. And then I come back to the normal levels. And remember, 16% of body weight gain during this period means persistence, right? You have here a trial, this is from 2015, 2016, from Trial Nutrition, showing that you're doing a pre-picking, you have 4% more egg production up to 24 weeks. You have 4% more egg production, you have 2% more egg weight, you have 5% more egg mass, and you have a better feed conversion. If you don't do, is it gonna bankrupt? Is it gonna kill your flock? No, it won't. But if you do, you're gonna have a little bit more profitability faster. It's a very short period. So it's optional, but it's a good option to do. Post-peak, all right, you achieved the post-peak. Now you need to monitor and relax. The other way to say this, if you screw up after peak, there's not much you can do. The post-peak, you cannot fix many things. And what we are seeing is that the production is changing a lot. Here we are seeing, and I'm sorry to put highline brown, because we don't have so historical data from W-80, because here we are seeing the highline brown since 1984. And of course, in 1984, we didn't have W-80 yet, so that's the reason. But this is just a trend, and Petek can confirm, and she showed on her presentation, that every single line that we have in Highline, we are working on the same way, looking for more persistence of production. So that's the behavior, generation after generation. You are seeing 1984 to 2020. You see that from 1984 to the 1998 generation, they try to achieve a higher peak and an earlier peak, but after 1998, it's persistence, persistence, persistence. So you can see from 1998, the yellow line, to 2020, the peak didn't change that much. But see what happens with the persistence. The flux is 8 to 10% higher, percentage points, higher production at the end. What's the consequence of that? If you keep changing your diets according to production, what happened? You have flocks with 70-something weeks, sometimes with production still above 90%. If you keep the diet change only according to the production, you're going to end up with a very old laying hen with a low calcium diet and high phosphorus. And this is going to damage your shell quality. So the message here is keep updating your amino acids and energy according to the production, but change your calcium and phosphorus according to the age. Clear? Now, number of phases. This is an eternal discussion that we have when you go visit a farm. How many phases should I use? 1 phase in production, 2, 3. So I'm going to ask you guys, forget the economics, forget the limitations that we have in the feed mill, the logistics, considering just the physiology of the laying hen. How many feed phases should I have during the production? 2, 3, 5, how many? 1 per week. We should have 1 phase per week. And believe it or not, there's a lot of farms that reformulate every single week because the body weight changed, the body weight gain changed, the egg mass changed, so the requirements changed. Is it possible to do 1 phase per week? Yes, but it's not so practical. But one thing you can have in mind, The more phases of feed you provide, better gonna be your production and cheaper gonna be your nutrition program. Why? So this is what we are seeing. This is just the lysine requirement that I put here, from 18 weeks to 100 weeks, and this is the feed intake. Energy gonna be the same, and the other amino acids, the calcium, the phosphorus, you're gonna have not ever gonna be linear. You're gonna change, you're gonna have peaks, and you're gonna have dips. The problem is that not all of them happen at the same time. But let's go on. So what happens if I have just this feeding program with 2 phases? Phase 1 up to 40 weeks, phase 2 after 40 weeks or 45, or whatever. This is the consequence. So I have 2 phases. I see in the blue line now, I have this diet that has, I don't know, 0.70 something, or 0.8, or 0.5, or 0.3, or 1%, doesn't matter. Depends on the feed intake and the requirement. But okay, I have the onset of production, I keep it with this lysine, the feed intake goes up, the lysine intake goes up. Get to 40 weeks, 45 weeks, I change the phase, my feed intake goes up, the requirement goes up a little bit, and then I keep this diet up to the end. What we are seeing here, negative nutrient intake. What's the consequence of that? Poor early egg weight, poor early production, because I'm underfeeding these birds. What's the consequence of that later on? Excessive egg weight, bigger hen, excess of nutrients that you don't need, and you are just giving corn and soybean meal and whatever to go to the manure, not for the chicken, and a way more expensive feed. So you can be sure, few feed phases, poor early egg weight, poor early production, excessive late egg weight, excessive late body weight and feed intake, and of course a way more expensive feeding program, because at the moment that you have the highest feed intake, you are providing a feed that's too concentrated for the production. So I will not tell you guys how many phases you should do, but you can be assured of that. The less feed phases you do, less efficient and more expensive your program, and the other way around. The more feed phases you provide, better gonna be your production and cheaper gonna be your program, okay? Shell quality. I heard over and over that one of the greatest things about the W-80 India is the shell quality, especially in longer transportations, that this you can get some impacts here and there, and you don't have so much egg breakage as the other varieties. And a lot of this is what Petek showed in the presentation. The way they are selecting, it's a way that we don't need only shell thickness, but it's a complex between shell thickness and shell flexibility. So it's almost like a shock absorber that you can impact one egg to another. You have a little bit of flexibilization of the shell, and it doesn't break. So you have 2 consequences of that. The first of all is that you don't need to work with so much higher levels of calcium and phosphorus to this, so it is a little bit cheaper program. But the major consequence of that is, if you don't need so much shell thickness to have a good shell, the amount of calcium inside the medullary bones is going to give you more egg numbers. So they are doing a really nice job providing us a shell that it's more flexible and doesn't need to be so thick, but we need to support that with nutrition. And one of the main things is provide the proper amount of trace minerals to give the elasticity of this membrane, because that's where the flexibility is. If you have this membrane well developed, these mammillary cones will flexibilize a little bit with the inner membrane, and they won't rupture the egg. So the trace minerals are going to be very important. Remember that calcium in eggshell quality is not only about the amount of calcium, but when you give the calcium. if you give 4.1 grams of calcium per bird per day, 70% in the morning, 30% in the afternoon, or 30% in the morning and 70% in the afternoon, it's completely different. In the afternoon, they have more appetite, they have more capability of digest and absorb this calcium, and you're going to have a better eggshell quality. In terms of shell quality, the peak of calcium intake should be 5 to 6 hours before the dark period. So that's why the top dressing of limestone works so well. And remember, this is really nice. You can see here, if a laying hen has an empty oviduct, that means it's not producing an egg, they will not eat as much calcium. Remember that I said, if they are good and if they are well developed, they will self-regulate the limestone intake according to the calcium requirement. So the top dressing of calcium, it will not affect the birds that will not be producing an egg because they will simply not eat that limestone. That's the beauty of it. They can select to eat or not to eat, okay? Now, my last point here, to keep in my 30 minutes, is this side note, robustness versus efficiency. So, during my visits, still I hear this a lot. I love Highline, W-80 because of the eggshell quality, the production, but I don't like so much that is not so resistant to diseases or not to recover as fast from the disease. So, what is happening? And I put this parallel for you guys. Robustness and efficiency. Efficient is the one that racing car, that when it hits the wall, it will break the car apart and will not make any damage to the wall. But the robust, it will crush this wall and it won't have any damage to the car, in this case, the laying hen. But my question is, at what cost this happens? What is the wall? The wall in my farm is the disease challenges, is the bad ingredients, it is the mycotoxin, the heat stress, it is the immunological modulation, it is the water quality, whatever is the wall. But that's the wall, and then you have to choose an animal that is more robust or more efficient. So what's the deal here? Let's take a look at this. We know there are several ways to predict how much energy you need. And here we're going to talk just about energy, for the sake of time, but it is going to be the same with amino acids, for example, with protein, but energy. So there are several equations that you can predict the energy according to the body weight gain, according to the egg mass of the animal, but all of them going to put you in the same, almost in the same direction. For 100% of the energy intake, about 1% goes to body weight gain, about 47% goes to egg mass, that is number of eggs crossed with egg weight, about 3% go to thermical regulation, and about 49% is for maintenance. So you can almost say energy is half maintenance and half production, okay? What is in this maintenance? This maintenance is tissue formation, is feather formation, is hyperventilation during the heat stress, it is movement, activity, immunological modulation. Immunological modulation alone can take 30 to 40 kilocalories a day. It's more than 10% increase in energy intake. So all of this is in this maintenance package. So what happens if Petek is doing her selection here and she's able to improve not a huge amount, but just 3% of the efficiency in temperature regulation? So let's decrease a little bit the amount of energy that goes for temperature regulation, and let's decrease a little bit the amount of energy for body maintenance. So what's going to happen? Suddenly, I have percentually more energy being in egg production, or for the 300 kilocalories that the chicken eats every day, we have less use for maintenance, so you have more for egg production. And I did this calculation only, again, with 97% in temperature regulation and maintenance, just 3% improvement over 30 years. That is very reasonable, right? 30% in no more than 30 years, anyway, just for the example. So, and then I did the calculations. 1.55 kilos of body weight, 95% of production, 58 grams egg weight. What's the difference? The more efficient variety needs 299 kilocalories, and the less efficient, that has 3% more requirements just for maintenance, so it's not for everything, it's just for maintenance, requires 307 kilocalories. 6, 7, 8 kilocalories, not much, right? Right, let's see. 299 versus 307. From one diet with 2650 kilocalories, and I was very high here. We know that in India we go much lower than this, but can be, just for the example. Just for this, the feed intake, if you have the same diet for W-80 and the same diet for the less efficient breed, it means from 113 to 116 grams of feed. It's 3 grams more per bird per day, every day, under the same diet, under the same conditions. So, one farm size, 5 lakh. Total feed per day, 56 tons versus 58 tons. Total feed per year, 20,000 metric tons versus 21,000 metric tons. 26 rupees per kilo. That is 1 crore per day, or 535 or 53 per year. Just the difference between this W-80 and the competitor, again, under the same environment, under the same diet, is 1.3 crore rupees, under the same conditions. So that is the price of robustness. I'm saying that if you go from a less efficient to a more efficient laying hen with 500,000 or 5 lakh farm size, you can buy a new BMW X7 per year. Just with this difference. And if you cannot, you talk to Suresh and make things happen, all right? So guys, that is my question for you. What strategy should I apply for my company? I had a 500,000 laying hens, so let's go back to cars. I have 50 cars in my fleet. What strategy should I use? All employees in my company gonna drive a car capable of knocking a wall, even that maybe I just have 1 car hitting a wall per year, but I'm gonna keep expanding this fuel, or all my employees should avoid hitting a wall. My message is eliminate all the walls from your farm and keep with a more efficient way to produce an egg, right? My summary of all of this, remember, if you don't achieve the body weight gain, there is not compensatory system development. Your body weight efforts before and after 12 weeks are completely different. Before 12 weeks, let's try to achieve all the body weights. If it doesn't happen, don't try to compensate that after 12 weeks. Your pre-picking equals up body reserves, persistent shell quality, internal shell quality. What's the percentage of body weight gain from the W-80 from first egg to peak of production? 16%. All right. Number of phases. How many phases I need in a cycle? I don't know. You tell me. For the chicken, 1 per week. For the farm, 1 per year. Get in the middle. Shell thickness and flexibility. That's the Highline advantage. We can produce more eggs with the same amount of calcium in the medullary bone. And remember the cost of robustness. If you have something that is more robust, it's not free. This is costing you money. So you choose, you keep a farm in an average condition and put a more robust animal, or you manage your farm very well and have a more efficient animal that don't need to be as robust and going to be more efficient. Okay? My final message is this. Your nutrition is at least 70% of your cost or more. Paying attention in everything else in your farm, I don't know, napkins, cups, mugs for the whatever, and how you are doing, putting solar panels, doing whatever you want without paying attention in the nutrition. It's the same of eat this big tally here, and then just drink a lemon water to save on kilocalories. Doesn't make any sense. Okay? So that's it, guys, and thank you again.